What's up, Team Tobias? What's up, Norfolk? This is the Tobias Literary Lens. This is the Literary Lens podcast. I'm Lane Haymont here with Ann Rose, Jackie Lipton, and Kelly Dyksterhouse.
Lane.
Yes.
That was like the most anticlimactic, like the most monotone, the most, I don't even know
It's
what
a Monday.
happened. That was the most Monday opening to this podcast I have ever seen.
It's truly a case of the Mondays. Okay, so today I want to talk about when to send your next project to your agent and what to do when you're out on submission. I think that's what I want to talk about, right?
I think that's what you want to talk about.
Yeah, it's exactly what I want to talk about. So Kelly, what do you think?
Thanks for putting me on.
You're welcome.
So maybe when to send your next project to your agent, maybe we should step back first and talk about how to decide what your next project is, which is kind of the first step in the process. And I imagine we all do that a little bit differently. With my clients, I usually have them send me a couple pitches for when they go out on sub. You know, the best way to deal with sub anxiety is to just be writing your next book. So I usually have them send me several pitches, and then I'll analyze them. We'll meet and talk and see what they're most excited about, what they're farthest along with, what's best for the market. It's kind of a toss up. And then they work on that. And then ideally, you send it to your agent when it's ready to go, when you deem that it's ready to go to the publisher. And of course, your agent will probably read it and have some thoughts, may do one round of revision, but it should be as polished as you can make it before, at least that's the ideal. Do you guys work the same way, similar? What's your feedback?
I usually tell clients to send me a pitch beforehand, and I pitch it to them as, you don't want to spend 6 months writing a book that you love, send it my way. Then I'm like, oh yeah, guess what? No one ever wants this type of material again. Everyone's sick of it. They hate it. And I'm going to get punched in the face if I submit this to an editor. And then you're left standing with a book you love, you spent 6 months on, like, what the F? Mm-hmm. So clients tend to send me pitches, a blurb, and I say, it's not going to work. What else do you got? So at that point, I lost my train of thought. But
right.
So I'm going to end it there.
I think for me, it depends very much on the client, because I do have some clients who have a million projects on the boil at once, which comes with its own challenges. And clients struggling for the next idea. So I do tend to kick ideas around with people, but I haven't recently had clients who have no idea what they want to do next. I think typically what it's been is, here's 3 or 4 thoughts I have. Which one do you think I should go with next? And sometimes one of the challenges I have some clients who are very fast writers and some clients who are very slow writers. And the problem with the slow writers, and I'm a slow writer, so there's nothing wrong with being a slow writer, but the market changes. So while you shouldn't write to the market, I often feel bad when I've said, wow, this has a lot of promise. And then, of course, by the time it gets written, either it feels stale or the market has changed. So that's another challenge.
So what do you do in that situation, Jackie?
Oh, I wish I knew. I think it's a good idea to be on top of those things. I do have a number of clients I work on kind of deadlines, like nudges with them, where we'll put in the calendar, hey, can you check back in with me in 3 months? And I'll have it in my calendar. So at least I'll have a sense of how this is going and how they're progressing and what's getting in the way. I mean, there's nothing you can do to make a slow writer write faster. And I would prefer people to take their time and write the best piece they can write, which goes to your earlier point about things being ready. sometimes you do have to put a piece on the back burner and move to something else and say, okay, well, this might be a second book on a different contract. It's such a, roll of the dice, this whole profession.
Yeah, I do it the same way. Like I don't generally have them email me pitches. I generally like to have a conversation so we can like talk a little. I know it's so weird. So we can generally I usually have questions, right? Like so I want to dig deeper into the manuscript. I want to understand their intentions behind it. I want to get like to the big conflict management, like all the things. Like I want to have all the talks about what it is. And I mean, I am guilty of this as a writer myself. Like I go to my agent, Ava, who is amazing. And I love you, Ava, if you're listening. And I'll be like, so I have this idea. And she'll be like, Anne, that's great. Do you have a plot? And I'm like, listen, I don't need your plot talk at this moment. I just need to know if you like my idea. And so I am my own worst client in that respect. But I will do the same thing. Like, okay, well, that sounds like a great idea, but what's the plot? Like, what are we doing? And so I try to help my clients like dig into those questions a little bit because I'm right there too. I love to do it. I love to make that. I love the idea. And then, when you have to get cool goals, motivations, conflict, all that stuff, then okay, maybe this isn't the idea. I don't know, but I like to talk through those.
But I was going to jump in to what Anne said, because I think I've had 2 or 3 conversations Friday and today about this exact thing of plot, stakes, goals, that sometimes just a concept sounds so unbelievably cool, but it's not a manuscript unless there's a character who is on some kind of journey and there are some kind of stakes. It matters. The reader is reading it because there is something that, people aren't going to stick with a book for 300 pages because the concept is cool. Something actually has to happen. There has to be a character or a situation we engage with. And that is really hard to teach. And even experienced authors struggle with that experience because no 2 books are the same. So someone who could do the plot perfectly well in their debut gets to their second book and they're like, well, I thought that's what I was doing. I thought this character really did have a really important goal with high stakes. And it's like, yeah, it's in there, but it's buried under all this other stuff.
Yeah. That's why I like to have those conversations early, and I'll ask those questions, and I'm that person, and I am my own worst enemy, because then I try to do that to myself sometimes too. And I'm like, oh, this is terrible. Why do I do this to people? But we do need them at the end of the day. So it makes for a stronger story.
Absolutely.
And I guess too, unless you're, Stephen King, it's not like the world is waiting for your next book. This matters more to you and your agent than it does to the world at large. And you have to kind of make a case for why the world will care about this book. And I know this is maybe straying off the topic, because the topic is like, how do you pin down the next project, and how do you know when it's ready to send to the agent, and how does the agent know when it's ready to send out into the market? It is important, I think, to, I don't know, this is going to sound cheesy, but like be a little bit not humble about it, but really make the case about why this book matters, not just because you like it or because you and your agent support each other and you like each other. It has to matter to the marketing department at Simon & Schuster or whoever, and that's the challenge.
And not just matter to them in possibly 2 years from now.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we sell the book now, it could come out 2 years from now. So why should it matter then? So that's another whole conversation to have that you bring up, Jackie. Good points.
Do you guys, when you're talking about next projects, also take into consideration your client's brand? I know that right now we're in a series, at least in Kidlit, where lots of people are trying to write across multiple markets, middle grade or YA or picture book, or crossing over into adults. So if they've had a successful YA, do you want them to follow up with another YA, but say their next idea is for a middle grade? Are these, I'm assuming these are all things that you talk about and also the editor who they're wanting to write with, for going out wide or staying with the same house. There's all kinds of things to take into consideration, but especially Lane and, well, you all work at more on the adult side. So it's different than, my world's very isolated and kidlit. How do those conversations go on the adult side?
I think it, and this is going to sound very Bill Clinton-y, I think it's how you define a brand, because I think some brands are very defined. Like Brandon Sanderson, fantasy. He's the fantasy dude. But other people like Johnny Compton, speaking with his editor, her suggestion was his brand was heart. All the characters, you can feel the heart in them. And, that feels like something everyone else wants in a book that should be there. But the way he does it is just it's him. It's the brand. It's a Johnny Compton thing.
Right.
I mean, I do think too that some people are just better at some things than others. And, I do have clients who are known for a certain thing. Like I rep Marcy Rendon, who's known for native crime with fairly dark themes. I have Asha Grayling, whose debut is coming out in September. And her first book is a historical mystery with an incredibly diverse cast. And she does very twisty, I like mystery. She does very twisty mysteries. Both of those writers do lots of other things. So there is always an expectation that Marcy will come out with the next Cash Blackbear book or, whatever it is. But she's also very well known for poetry. She's also very well getting known for, she picture books. She's got 3 picture books coming out. So I think it has to do with, is someone talented across a lot of genres that you can develop and not interfere with each other? Or, sometimes there's someone who's very good at one thing but not great at other things. And I'm always happy to put in the time to try and help someone who wants to expand into another area. But if they're incredibly talented at one area, you don't want to drop that, as long as they're happy still working in that area. So, I do hope that Asha, who is incredibly diverse in her range, continues to write the twisty historical mysteries, because she's amazing at them, but she's also good at other stuff.
I think it's like a combination too, right? Like we no longer live in a day and an age where a writer can just write one book a year and, they make a living wage and they can be an author and all of that. So we have to keep those into consideration. So, branching out into other areas, age groups, genres, those kinds of things is almost necessary now for writers to be able to keep writing. So I think it's a conversation that you have to have with each individual author and what it is that their expectations are and what they want to do with their career. So, and that can look very different from one author to the next and what they really want. So I think all of this, yes.
I always tell my clients, always be writing, which I stole from Glengarry Glen Ross. I think now you can write across numerous genres at the same time, whereas before people said, no, you need to break out in one genre before we break you out in another. For example, Cynthia Palaio writes like fairy tale horror, but she's a poet. She won the Bram Stoker for poetry. So I think you can be known for many different things. And I think it's much more common now for authors to write for multiple publishers at the same time. Like you can write for Little Brown and have something else coming out with a different publisher. Cynthia Palaio, she writes for Thomas and Mercer, and her backlist is coming out with Union Square. Final thoughts?
Final thoughts on what exactly?
Dragons?
Well, actually, there was one other thing that maybe we should touch on that some of us were discussing in the last week. And that was that question of how often you want to be out on sub when you're going out wide. So I'm not talking about where you're sending the next book to the editor you're working with. I'm talking about where you have a bunch of projects and the author is like, well, I want to be out on sub. how many things can we have out on sub? How many times a year can we, and it's not always a good thing. I mean, part of our job is to manage those expectations because, and again, it's author dependent, because some authors you could be out with 3 or 4 different things in different markets, and you use pen names and handle non-compete clauses, and you can publish lots of stuff, but it's not always a good strategy, particularly if you're not writing in many different markets. And that's a conversation I think a lot of agents and authors are having that conversation a lot. And I think a lot of authors feel like if they're not actively out on submission, they're failing or they're not doing something right. And that just couldn't be further from the truth. And I find that I have that discussion fairly often with people. And, Kelly, you go. I'm losing my train of thought.
I think it's so much wiser to take your time and send quality work that is well developed, and the strategy behind it is wise, rather than just getting stuff out the door as fast as you can because you're anxious that you don't have anything on sub. And so, you're going to lose your momentum. And that's just really, that doesn't really happen.
I'm sure this also has a lot. I mean, I don't do generally picture books, and I think Kelly, you're our picture book. Well, Jackie, you do some picture books, but I'm sure this is a difference there too, because picture books, from my understanding, generally speaking, editors turn them around a little bit quicker, and so you can have and a writer can obviously write multiple picture books in a year, right? So I'm sure that comes into play a lot. So how does that affect going out on submission? Because you are going to be hitting generally the same editors.
Right. Writers can write picture books quickly, but it's not necessarily that they can write picture books well quickly. Like, I think a picture book often can take as long as a novel to write, because they may be 500 words, but they're very complex. But they certainly can't be illustrated quickly. And that's where the backup happens, is as you're waiting for the art to come in. And so what, the average picture book's 24 months now, I think, in terms of between when it's sold and when it comes out. And of course, writers are anxious during that time. They want to get more work out while they're waiting. And so you do. Yeah.
And if you think about it too, with novels, often the publisher doesn't want to see the option book or the next book until they get a sense of the sales figures for the first book. But if a picture book takes 24 months to come out, someone is really like a debut without a track record for that whole period. They may have sold a bunch of books, but there's no data on how the books are going to sell. And that makes it challenging, because you do hit a point where it does become hard until you have books out there that are selling. And particularly, I'm just going to make the sucky economy comment, picture books are freaking expensive to buy. So, it is hard to hit a good sales track record at a time when that might be a luxury. So maybe schools and libraries are buying picture books, putting book banning aside as another topic. But, mums and dads may not, parents, aunts, uncles may not be out there buying that many picture books because they really are expensive.
And I think, like someone said, the anxiety of not being on submission. People, as soon as they get a book deal, they want to send something else out. Mm-hmm. I'm like, we can't have more than, I tell clients, we can't have more than one thing out at once, because I don't want to saturate the market. I want an editor to see George Glass and think, oh, great, another George Glass book. Not, oh, great, another George Glass book. And I also, the option books irks me in that publishers want to wait. In my experience now, publishers want to wait until they have a year's worth of sales to say, okay, now we'll consider the option book. And I'm like, bruh, I understand, I know how you work, but that's not how authors work. And you have your prerogative, and I have my prerogative. I have fiduciary duty to my client, not to some mega evil corporation owned by stockholders across the world.
And I think that's something agents can help with a little bit, although it's often, you know, just immovable force meets whatever the other thing is. But, you know, often the editor will say, well, show me the manuscript. At least I can tell you if it's a pass from us. Or, you know, show me the manuscript. Yes, I can give you an indication that I would be interested in taking it to acquisitions, but I can't do it until October or whatever it might be. So that's a point in the process at which having a really good working relationship with your editor and a very sort of transparent relationship between the editor and agent can be helpful. The editor doesn't have all the power because it is the publishing house and the contracts department that are going to say, well, we don't have to decide on the option book until this particular date. But at least you can get some feedback. You know, if you have a good working relationship, you can usually get some feedback earlier or even get them to move earlier.
Yeah, I like to have clients put together a bunch of pitches and run it by their editor so the editor can say, oh, I like this one the best. I'm like, okay, client, start working on this, start developing it. You know, because for the option, you usually only need first 3 chapters and a synopsis. But the more the merrier. And I've had publishers ask for a full manuscript, which, you know, luckily we had it. So still waiting to hear back. Knock on wood. Thank you, Anne.
I think, I don't know if we ever really answered the question too on like when you send the next project to your agent, right? Like, so we kind of started talking about it, but we didn't really finish talking about it. So I think
I tell clients, I'm going to interrupt you because I have the best answer. Someone told me this. Send it to me when you think it's your best. Send it to me when you're not going to be ashamed that I read it.
That's pretty good. I think that we should never be the first reads.
Never. Yeah.
I think someone else should read it before we read it. So, and I even say that as an author myself. So I think someone else's eyes should have been on it and you've gotten some feedback from somebody else. I think in general, like we have about 3 rounds in us before we start losing our perspective on books and what they need to be and all of that. So the cleaner and the, you know, that's why again, this is why I like to have really in-depth conversations with my clients beforehand. So there's not a lot of back and forth after that first draft is made, because I think that just makes it easier for everyone in the long run. What do y'all think?
I've had clients send me rough drafts, but with the knowledge that these clients can send me a rough draft, if that makes sense. Otherwise, you know, there are some clients I say, send it to me when you feel it's ready. And usually they send in a manuscript that they would have queried in the first place.
Yeah, I think some of the trickier situations is where the client really, really feels the piece is ready and the agent doesn't feel it's ready. And, you know, that can cause various different dynamics. I mean, agents aren't always right. We're not infallible. But if we really, really don't think something is ready and the client's very keen to get it out, all right, some of us think we are infallible, but I'm very much in the not infallible camp. But, you know, sometimes that may be a sign that, you know, if you really feel that your agent doesn't get your vision, maybe that is time to think about a new agent. More often, I think it's just a time for everyone to kind of take a step aside, take a step back and mull. So if the agent gives you comments saying, here's what I think you need to do, and you're like, no, I think it's ready. And this is like all our MFA instructors used to say this to us too, take a few days, let the feedback sink in and then see if it is resonating, because if you really felt, hey, this was ready to go, and then someone says, well, here's 20 pages of comments, it's like, no, it's ready to go. But then if you think about it, maybe it's somewhere in between the two.
Yeah, I don't like being told I need to send something out, because my job is to know what should be out there, as in what I should send out, what I'm comfortable sending out. There's some projects I have outright refused to send out, saying, listen, this isn't going to sell and I'm not going to send it out. And a client will say, why? I'm like, because I'm going to look like an asshole. You're going to look like an asshole. And that doesn't help anyone.
Right.
And actually, that's a really, really important point that I think a lot of authors don't appreciate, that aspect of it. And it goes to that question of like always being out on sub and the editor's getting tired of seeing subs from a particular person. But it's not just the way the editor is going to see the author, it's the way the editor is going to see the agent. And to the extent that you're really thinking your agent should be doing more in terms of submissions, and the agent is saying, well, that's not going to help you in the long run, if you insist on sort of weakening your agent's position in the market so that when people see a submission from Jackie Lipton, they're like, oh, not Jackie again, then I can't be an effective agent for anyone. So It is important to bear that in mind, that these decisions about when it's ready and who to send it to, I'm pretty transparent and I'm pretty, open with my clients about what I'm doing. And I'm pretty open about, if you don't agree with my strategy, that may be time to find another agent. But it is important to bear that whole other dynamic in mind. It's not just author wanting to be on submission. It's like, well, what does that mean for that author? What does that mean for the agent's reputation? What does that mean for the other creatives that the author that the agent represents?
Ann and I had that conversation today where I sent a book to a certain publisher I didn't want to send. I wasn't comfortable sending, but it was earlier in my career. The client insisted, so I did. And the editor passed, and I said, why'd you pass? And she said this. And I was like, I fucking knew it, because that's the exact reason I didn't want to send it out. And I've yet to sell to this publisher, and I just realized today it may be because of that project. It's not a big 5, so don't anyone worry.
I mean, it could be. I don't know. I think that I don't think that's what I don't think that tarnished your reputation. I think it's just you haven't.
I hope not.
I think you just haven't found that thing that they want yet. So I think it's still open for you, Lane.
Fingers crossed.
I think so.
I bet we all have one, but I think there's one editor out there who I can think of who I'm fairly sure thinks I'm pretty useless and have bad judgment. And there are reasons for that. And I hope I am overthinking it. But I think we all have that one editor that we've just done something really silly in front of and never managed to sell to them after that. So we were all young baby agents at one time.
There was that one guy who wanted to knife me in an alleyway, and he was like, I better not see you. And I was like, oh.
That was an editor?
No, I just made that up.
Oh, good.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure editors have made mistakes too. So if they can't forgive agents for making mistakes, then I mean, I don't know. I mean, we all make mistakes. We all get our names typed wrong. We all, send an email before we should have. I mean, it's 100 things. Like, I think that we all need to give each other grace in the long run. And that's agents to editors, editors to agents, agents to writers, all around, everyone around the board. We all need to just give each other a little bit more grace these days.
Yeah.
Now, final thoughts.
What are your thoughts on musical theatre, Lane?
I hate musicals. Musicals are awful. They're the worst, and everyone will come at me as saying I'm a boorish nincompoop, but that's fine. I don't like musicals.
That was awful. My final thought. My final thought was to just bring that to everyone's attention.
Including Wicked and Hamilton.
Wicked is amazing. We've had this discussion. Wicked is amazing. So
amazingly bad.
Amazingly good. Have you seen it, Lane?
No, but you told me how.
Oh, well, then you can't have an opinion about it.
It ends on a hopeful note and how great it is. As if we know the bad witch gets murdered in the very beginning and melts away. So yeah, not very hopeful.
All right. Well, we can't give anyway.
I derailed that. Sorry.
Totally derailed.
That's what happens with musicals. They ruin everything.
They do not ruin everything.
Life is ruined by musicals.
All right. So, final thought: authors, do not query Lane with your musical theater story because he will not get it. Just
Unless
so
it's
you
a
know.
unless it's a horror about musical theater kids getting brutally murdered.
That could be cool, actually.
I mean,
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that exists. So,
Probably. Yep.
cool.
but they might be singing, Lane, when they do it.
That's fine. It's on page. I don't care. I don't have to
Okay.
watch them prance around.
But what if you sell it as a film? I mean, this is what we do. We sell film rights, and then there's going to
A
have to be singing.
a
A
musical where
musical horror. Yeah.
where
Do it.
they did Anna and the Apocalypse, and I didn't like it because it was a musical. It's a zombie apocalypse, a musical, and it's awful. I didn't like it. I'm sorry to whoever made that movie. Fantastic movie, but not for me. Kelly?
I love musicals.
Oh, my heart.
Would you like some final thoughts about the topic we were discussing?
Oh, those.
I mean,
I don't have any.
Final thoughts for me are what Lane started with at the beginning was just never stop writing. Just if you are a creator or creating, arting, drawing, illustrating, arting. Yeah, it's the best way to handle anxiety. And I think also open communication with your agent.
And I would add to that you don't have to sell everything that you write. Writing is never wasted. Creative endeavor is never wasted. It's adding to your experience. It's adding to your toolbox. You have little bits and pieces that you might repurpose later on for something else. So never think it's a waste of time.
I agree with both of those things. I don't have anything else to add to that. I think that's really good. Just talk to your agent, have those conversations early on, have them often about what your expectations are, and make sure you're having those talks.
Anne, how about you take us out?
Oh, me. Okay. Did you want to give us your final thoughts, Lane? Because I don't think you gave us your final thoughts.
Musicals are awful. Don't send us your work until you think it's your best, and you won't be embarrassed if I showed it to my brother. Yeah.
Why would you show it to your brother?
I don't know. I wouldn't, but I mean, just send me your best so you're not going to be embarrassed.
Leave it there, period.
Yes. Send me your best, period.
All right. Well, that is another episode of The Literary Lens here with the Tobias Literary Agency with Lane Haymont, Kelly Dykstra House, Jackie Lipton, and me, Ann Rose. So make sure you like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. Let us know about some topics you'd love for us to discuss here on The Literary Lens. And we hope to see you again next time.